Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Trucking Matters webinar, and welcome into 2026. Our Trucking Matters webinar today continues its focus on safety with our Safety Impact team. And in fact, it's our first 2026 webinar overall, and I'm your host, Thom Albrecht, the Chief Revenue Officer of Reliance Partners. Today's episode is episode 5 of a 9-part safety impact webinar series that we began last fall and which will continue into May of this year. The focus has been going through the 7 CSA Basics, and we've gone through the first 4. And as we had originally planned, today's episode is going to be built around case studies. And I don't know about the audience, but for me, I don't care what the topic is. It could be business, sports, trucking insurance, or anything. I tend to really learn a lot more when you take a look at real life case studies. So I'm excited about today's episode. Mark and Mark Barlar and Daniel Vega join us once again, and they're going to be sharing a lot of their knowledge from how they've helped real actual clients. Guys, I want to welcome you back to the show, and happy 2026.
Happy New Year,
Thanks,
Tom.
Tom. I appreciate it.
Well, we do this every time, but there's always some newcomers in today's or in a webinar. So I'm just going to ask each of you to spend a moment, tell us a little bit about your background, what you were doing before Reliance, and then what you do at Reliance to help our clients and prospects. Mark, why don't you start us off?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Barlar. I am a former DOT roadside inspector, retired from the Wisconsin State Patrol after 22 and a half years of doing nothing but roadside inspections. During that time, I've done about 10,000 roadside inspections on the I-94 north-south corridor in between Milwaukee and Chicago. Sees about 20,000 trucks a day bypass in that corridor. I was an instructor for FMCSA for the Part A program, which is your driver's hours of service, CDL, the medical qualifications, the hazardous material inspection program, and the cargo tank inspection program. Since coming over to Reliance in 2020, I helped our clients with a multitude of things, mostly with data queues, with doing over 1,500 of them in the last 5 years.
That's great. And Daniel, tell us a little bit about yourself, including what you do at Reliance.
Hi guys, my name is Daniel Vega, Director of Safety for Reliance. Before joining the insurance industry, I was a state trooper in Arizona, DOT inspector for approximately 10 years. Did a couple thousand inspections on I-8, I-10, southwest portion of Arizona. Then I transitioned over to the insurance industry. Probably 5 years ago. First over at Nationwide Insurance, helping our insureds with safety and compliance, and then moved over to Reliance about 2.5 years ago, 3 years. And now I'm helping our clients with trainings and data queues and anything that they need help with safety and compliance.
Yeah, and that's another reason why I'm excited is I think sometimes people think that if they're going to have a safety need, they don't know how to reach out to you or how to use the Reliance safety team. And so you're going to hear all sorts of different case studies where these guys made an impact on motor carriers. Mark, why don't you show us the next slide? All right, a little bit of housekeeping items before we get started here. Our next webinar will be on February 12th at 3 p.m. Eastern, and that will be about controlled substances and alcohol. And then you see driver fitness on March 19th. Pretty soon we'll establish the dates for April and May. And the May one, similar today, will end up with a new series of case studies, primarily tied to the episodes from February 12th, March 19th, and April, the last 3 of the 7 CSA Basics. You can either get with your Reliance producer or agent. You can also see that we'll be announcing more details about these upcoming episodes on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all the different socials. Previous episodes are also available on our podcast under Trucking Matters. So you've got the safety component of Trucking Matters, and then you've got borderless coverage, which Mark Vickers does a podcast about all things related to cross border. And then, of course, I do need to read this disclaimer to everyone. This presentation and webinar are designed for educational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as legal advice. The opinions and views expressed herein are not necessarily those of Reliance Partners and belong solely to the individual contributors. Nothing like an obligatory disclaimer, such as the world we live in. Well, let's go to the next slide. Okay, I think you guys are having some sort of rotation. Oh, by the way, I do want to let the audience know we will be taking questions. In fact, the nature of today's topic and conversation really lends itself to questions throughout. So feel free to chime in the midst of one of the case studies if you've got a question or need some clarification. And of course, we'll also do that at the end, but we hope to do it a little bit throughout the conversation. So, guys, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Tom, for that introduction. I'm going to handle the first case study here, and then we are going to alternate between myself and Daniel explaining each case study. So, case study number one is the dreaded FMCSA audit. For Vega Expedited Logistics Transport, failed an FMCSA audit. And their recordable accidents per million miles was 7.63. I mean, they only had two recordable accidents, but the miles that they had operated was only 262,000 in the last year. So that puts them well above the 1.5 million or 1.5 crashes per million miles. That is the cutoff limit on whether you pass or fail that factor in an audit. And if you fail it, you're an unsatisfactory for factor six, and it automatically puts you in a conditional rating. The client, Vega Expedited, contacted us, and from there, we were able to provide crash countermeasure training. And we take this crash countermeasure training, we adjust it to the individual client. We have a meeting with all of our drivers. We have to take a roll call of all of our drivers. We record that information, and then we create a safety management plan, which we then submitted to FMCSA. Once we submitted it to FMCSA, it seems like they're taking forever when it comes to audits and adjusting a a rating from conditional. They could because they have to take the um, unsatisfactory ratings first because those are clients that would get shut down if they get published. So these take a little bit of time, but once we were able to successfully submit this safety management plan in which we provided training of crash countermeasures to the drivers, and after a little while, FMCSA responded and the conditional rating was removed. And a conditional rating is a killer for a motor carrier in the fact that freight brokers don't want to work with carriers that have conditional ratings. So this was hurting their business quite a bit, and we were able to help out and get that rating removed. I believe they went back to a non-rated carrier at that point.
Mark, just for the audience sake, from the time you got the phone call to the time that the conditional rating was removed, approximately how long was that? I know you said it takes a while, but I'm sure the audience would appreciate a little bit of more specific sense of the timeline.
Well, with this timeline, this was several years ago, when you still had to send it into the state. Now we have to submit things, everything electronically now, and it just goes into a queue for any investigator when they get time to look at it. So I believe this one took about 3 months from the time that we were notified of it. We were able to get that training completed within a couple of weeks. We got it written up within another week, got it submitted, and it took about 2 months after that.
Great. Thank you.
So now we'll talk a little bit about case study number two, which is Vega Trucking LLC. So this carrier had a vehicle maintenance alert. That company um, vehicle maintenance increased over the past months. Highest they had reached is 82, which is above the 80 that they're supposed to be. So this was 6 months before their renewal. They contacted me saying, "Hey, can you help us? We want to improve and implement things to lower that score before we go into the renewal." And just by reviewing the inspections, I did figure out that their main issues were lights and tires. So I flew out, I visited the carrier, provided vehicle maintenance training to all the mechanics via PowerPoints and hands-on training, as you see that picture there. We were doing an inspection to let them know what a DOT inspector looks for during these inspections. So once I completed that, I went to their main office, sat down with the safety manager, and reviewed inspections. And so the plan was to determine where they were getting inspected and where were they getting most of the violations. So I determined it was New Mexico, Arizona, and California on the Interstate 10. And being from the west portion of the U.S., I kind of knew where the scales were at, and I recommended for their drivers to stop before these scales that they were getting inspected on. Um, I found a flying J or a Love's probably a couple miles before the inspection sites, and we put them on a map, and they implemented that. And as you could read right there, I mean, they were at 82 and now they're at a 63, and they went into the renewal without an alert by doing these
You,
things I recommended.
you know what I love about that solution is it's so straightforward. Um, stop at one of the travel centers along the way, make sure that your vehicle is ready to be inspected by a commercial truck inspector. And if it's not, then don't drive on. It didn't cost a lot of money or anything. It was just a matter of changing some very basic behavior.
Yeah, and people don't really talk about it, but that inter-trip inspection is very important. And it shows that it did help this carrier by reducing well below that 80% they were at, or 82%.
Yeah, that's a great example.
All right, moving on to case study number three, we have Barlar speedy delivery crash. I say it's in the crash alert. This is the historical when you look at the line graph and where we have it highlighted with the red box underneath it. Those are the CSA scores for Barlar speedy deliveries, and you can see that their scores were trending up from 54, 56 to 60, which is 5 percentage points below the alert level, unless you're a hazmat carrier. And at that point, if you are in the alert at 60%. So the motor carrier reached out to us. They are a client of ours and say, Mark, can you help us out with Barlar speedy deliveries crashes? Well, we went in to the Central Analysis Bureau and we saw that there were 14 crashes listed for Barlar Speedy Delivery. And none of them had a designation of being non-preventable, which means that somebody went in, looked at all the crashes, and put it through FMCSA's Crash Preventability Determination Program. We reached out to Barlar Speedy Delivery directly. We asked them to send us all 14 of their crashes. What we were able to do, we submitted a data queue for 6 out of the 14. That's just under 50%, and we won 5 of the 6 data queues that were submitted. The one data queue where it says no data correction made at the bottom, we couldn't do it under the Crash Preventability Determination Program, and I tried to have it listed as a non-reportable crash, but unfortunately, we were not able to win that one.
Mark, as you talk to them, I mean, it's one thing to deal with data queues, but were you also able to do some things that really address more the root cause? Because a data queue is fixing something that already occurred. What was your conversation like around, hey, here's some other things you can do just to avoid having any crashes to begin with?
One of them is to train their safety staff on when a crash does occur. Here's the crash preventability program. Look at some of the items that I have submitted. You can download those documents and use them as a template in case you have similar crashes in the future. Now, to try to prevent crashes from happening in the future, we discussed providing their drivers with crash countermeasure training, which really talks about things that drivers can do to help them avoid crashes in the future. And it really always comes down to speed and space, right? Don't follow too closely, don't speed. There's a few other things that we definitely focus on as well. Um, and that's how we help prevent those in the future. Once we provide those trains, we record them and we give it to the motor carrier so they can use it for onboarding or remedial training in the future for drivers that they find have been speeding or have been following too closely, or God forbid that there has been a crash.
Well, and the crash score went from 52% to 14, so that's about as dramatic as I've seen in a while.
Yeah, that was one that was a while ago. Another one, you can see where the actual crash scores go from 53 all the way down to 36 on 8/25. That is this year. We have had some similar cases with other motor carriers as well, but I use this one because it was so recent. And we were able to do almost half of their um, crashes we were able to do a data queue on. And realistically, it took a good 4 months, a month to get through all the crashes, and 3 months for FMCSA to respond to them. And this is just some of the back and forth that we had during our emails. We won our data queue for the Ohio crash. It was ruled non-preventable. This is the fifth crash out of six. One was still um, waiting on a decision. We won in the past month, two, one last month, for this month. In the last 2 months, the snapshot date for CSA tomorrow's cab is predicting the crash score to go from 52% to 14%. That's if we could get all of them done in that 1 month. It's an amazing drop in the crash score. We were able to data queue the six out of the 14. Hopefully, the sixth crash comes back, but the same decision. If you need any other assistance, please let me know. And then here's the response that we got from them not too long after that. You want us another one. It's kind of nice having those messages come in. And they got to this data queue because when we do the data queues for you, I do the data queues underneath my own login. I have my own, but the motor carrier sees every data queue that I do for them. And they got to this one before I was able to get to them. So that was a pretty nice email to see.
Mark, approximately how many trucks did, what was it, Barlar Speedy Delivery have?
It was well over 100.
Yep,
I, I couldn't give you the exact amount. I think there was a trucking company that had like 250, 260 right in there.
yep.
So
Good
good
size.
company.
Yeah.
Good size company.
Well, just a reminder, we've continued to add to the audience here. Feel free to share any questions through the chat icon at the bottom. We welcome those even before we get to the end of the presentation. There may be something about a case study that we're in the midst of at that moment. So shoot your questions in, whether they're questions of clarification or maybe a slightly different circumstance that your motor carrier has experienced. Daniel, take it away again.
So this is case study for Vega Super Transport, roughly 230, 240 units. It went to alert in hours of service. So they were at a 67%, and they contacted me because they were getting inspected a lot more because the ISS jumped to a 94. So they were getting inspected, contacted more, and so they said, "Hey, can you help us lower the hours of service score?" And of course, I said yes. And so that picture right there, that's the company that I flew to Mexico to give them the hours of service training. Um, the people who review and audit these sat in on the trainings, but also their dispatchers sat in on the training and their safety managers. So there was quite a few people that sat in on this training. So I provided hours of service training to them, but I also reviewed their inspections that had hours of service violations, and we were able to submit two, one for a false log and the other one for unassigned driving time, which I believe is a total of 36 points. If you want to go to the next slide, Mark. Yeah, it was a total of 36 points. So within that month, they were under that 65%, and they've continued to improve, currently at a 38% in hours of service. And for that size company, that's a great score.
You know,
Um,
so, Daniel, I was really impressed with the number of people that came out for training there, and it wasn't just the traditional safety or compliance folks. Why was it important that some of the other teammates from that trucking company, I think you mentioned dispatch and others, why is it important for everyone to be on the same page?
because usually dispatch is the one that wants to get the load there on time. Like, hey, we need to get there, we need to get there.
Yeah,
And then the
you need to
people
get
auditing,
moving.
like, well, you can't, like, he doesn't have any hours. So they wanted everybody in on this training. Mostly the people auditing and reviewing, but they also wanted dispatch to kind of understand and hear the effects hours of service alert had and what needed to be done to correct that. And so we went through the training, answered questions, and then after that, I reviewed the inspections and won these two, actually won three, one for a vehicle maintenance one as well. But we got those two removed, and within that next month, they were out of alert. That just
So
shows the
yeah,
score where they were at, and now where they're at a 38%.
That's good.
that's an amazing. I mean, it's gone down almost 30 percentage points, which is an amazing.
Yeah, and for that, like the amount of units I discussed, 240, and they're all team drivers, so you're talking about 600 drivers, and yeah, it's pretty well ran operation.
Hopefully, they've got some bonuses at that company tied to the overall results of the organization and not just departmental bonuses, because those are huge impacts and really should have helped not only from a claims, but also hopefully with the insurance renewal period.
This funny you kind of mentioned something like that, Tommy, because at the beginning of last year, they came to me and said, "Hey, our owner wants to know what needs to be done to be in the top 5% of all companies that operate." And I was like, "Wow, you don't hear that often. You don't hear that." So
Very aspirational.
yeah,
Well, by looking at their scores with that 4%, they've achieved that for unsafe driving. So that's pretty
yeah.
awesome. All right, moving on to case study number 5, we have Albrecht Hazmat Solutions had a bad inspection. We can see that there are 5 total violations that are listed, including one with hazmat, 2 with tires, and 1 with load securement. The cargo wasn't properly secured. We had out of service for the tires. Um, and then operating a vehicle with the hazmat not blocked or braced. Now, what's interesting about hazmat motor carriers, if it's a hazmat company, normally their entire loads are hazmat. So if you get a cargo that's not secured and then hazmat that's not secured, that's a compounding a violation that's called stacking. That shouldn't be done. So we had to get some more information to figure out what exactly was being hauled on the vehicle. And I reviewed the inspection report, the hazmat bills of lading, and I did a data queue on 4 of the violations. And each one of them that we did, we had a positive outcome on. one of which the hazmat violation was removed. The fair to secure a load violation was amended, and the two tire violations had the out of service designation removed, which saves an additional 2 points for each of those violations because they shouldn't have been listed as out of service. Now, if unfortunately, the motor carrier could have called me directly when they got this inspection report, and I'd have told them, "Let me talk to the officer." And I could have let them know that those tires are not out of service. When they're out of service, you got to get them fixed at the scale facility where they're at, or it needs to be towed by an authorized tow truck. We could have saved this company a lot more money by having them give me a call, looking at the violations, and then talking to the officer stating that these are not out of service. Let's go into the out of service criteria and let's have a conversation. That way, we wouldn't have had to have roadside service come out and change out two tires out there on the road. This probably cost them well over $1,000 to have this occur.
So the earlier the better. By the way, we are starting to get a couple of questions, and I do want to make a comment. I'm sure that's a different tree in the Albrecht lineage there. It's got to be the relatives that never got their life together. No, just kidding here. So the one question came in from a gentleman named Sean. Could you please remind us where we can find the submitted datas so we can review whether it can be used? So we'll start that.
All right. So if we do a data queue for your company, what you do is you go into your company's portal. In the upper left-hand corner is the window of the FMCSA systems that you have access to. Data queue should be one of them. If it's not listed there, then we need to get that role added to you in the portal as well. And we can walk you through that process of how to get that added. But once we have that added, you double click on the data queue in that upper left-hand window, and it will open up the data queue system. You will be able to see every data queue that has been done for your company um, at that point, including the data queues that I do. Data queues that I do, I cannot see anybody else's. The motor carriers can see every data queue that has been done or affects their company. So that's pretty awesome. So you open up the data queue and you will see the documents that I submit um, for the data queue. And I don't submit in a data queue, they have a window that says, "Why do you want this violation to be reviewed?" I always put down the following. Please see uploaded document. For this one, it would be Albrecht data queue, the date of inspection for reasoning. That's all I put in there. I write up a Word document and I for my data queue and I upload it. So you can then download it by clicking on the document. You have access to it. And if there's a hazmat bill lading, if the officers or the responder, the state responds and they say, "Hey, we didn't do it, but we have these pictures to show why we didn't do it," you can download those pictures as well. But that's how you get the information. And if I do a data queue for you and you say, "Mark, can you just send me the document?" I can send you the document as well. That's how easy it is. You just go into the data queue and you can download it from there.
And a
If
couple other
you're not,
things. Well, I was going to say, Daniel, you just included the data queue link in the chat icon. And then, yes, this meeting is being recorded. Typically, within about 2 business days, Audra will be sending the recording link out to everyone who signed up. So not just the attendees today, but we had over 100 people sign up, and we know a lot of them rely on that recording after the fact. So yes, and we'll get to that other question in a second. Daniel, go ahead. You were about ready to say
I
something.
was gonna say that if you're not part of a carrier and you're like a consultant or a driver and you're listening to the meeting, you could create your own profile using that link I just attached. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and at the end of the program, we will re-show the contact information for both Mark and Daniel, phone and email. We had it at the beginning and kind of rushed through it, but if you're still not quite sure where to look or have other questions, we'll make their contact information again available again. Guys, have you had a chance to look at the question from Angela?
I have. So Angela, we have training that I created on how to recognize hazardous material loads that your dispatchers will receive from brokers. And once they see it, because hazmat loads have to be listed in a certain way. And if they recognize that, then they can say, hey, this is hazmat. Yeah, but it doesn't require a CDL or a hazmat endorsement on their CDL to operate. That very well it could be. But if you're not a motor carrier, a hazmat motor carrier, then our drivers have not been trained to haul hazmat, right? We may not have the required $1 million worth of insurance to haul the hazmat. So if you want more information on that, you can just give us a call, email us, and we can talk about it to provide training for our clients. Absolutely. We have that training available. And
And Mark, I think you meant the $5 million of required insurance.
$5 million for certain types of
Yep.
hazmat and the amount of hazmat that is hauled, because it's in bulk. There's two different levels. There's the $1 million, and then there's the $5 million that are required. Usually, propane haulers with the big cargo tanks, they need the $5 million, where most other companies will only need 1 million. And if you have a question regarding that, just give us a call. I will show you the regulation and walk you through.
That's great. Thank you to the audience for those questions, and please keep them coming. All right, guys, let's resume again.
Okay, so case study six, I'm going to discuss two bad inspections that safety manager reached out to me. He just wanted my opinion on them. One of the violations was for a seatbelt violation, and the other one was for a following distance with the citation issued to the driver. So usually, if it has a citation attached to it, 90 to 95% of the time, the state's gonna not even look at it. They're gonna be like, "Hey, we're gonna let the court proceedings play out, and then you could go ahead and submit it again." In this case, that driver had already paid the citation, and they just wanted me to look at it and give them my opinion. So I asked the company for the dash camera, driver facing, and a driver statement to review them. And after reviewing that information, I said, I'm gonna try to DQ these because I didn't think the violation was correct. So if you want to go to the next slide, Mark. So the first one, the officer comment stated failure to wear a seatbelt while operating a CMV at the time of the inspection. So I reviewed the footage and I reviewed, once I reviewed it, the driver was wearing a seatbelt up until he was providing the registration. He was inside the inspection bay. So I typed up my data queue and they denied it right away. They said, "Hey, our body camera on the officer was stuck downloading, but the officer's note said that when the CMV approached the exit ramp, he observed the driver not wearing a seatbelt." So then I went back to the carrier and said, "Hey, can I get a longer video of your driver?" And what do we know? That video showed the driver having the seatbelt on all the way up until he was in the inspection bay. So I submitted that again, and within an hour, they removed the violation from the inspection. So um, having key evidence like video goes a long way. In this case, that officer was not 100% truthful at the time. But that's why having evidence is crucial when you're submitting these. And then the
Yep.
second one was a following distance with the citation. So driver had already paid for it. I looked at the video evidence that they provided me, and I wrote it up in a Word doc and submitted it. Basically, state law under that state said that a driver is not guilty of this violation if another vehicle moves directly in front of another unit if overtaking or passing any like vehicle. So this case, I had video evidence of a vehicle in the number one lane passing our vehicle in the number two lane. They approach a state trooper parked within 5 to 8 feet from the fog line. And like anybody, I mean, me, Mark, or Tom, if we see an officer, what are we going to do? We're going to move over, right? We're trying to protect them. So the truck moves over directly in front of our unit when he sees the officer and does an unsafe lane change. So I how I wrote it was basically use state law. I had video evidence of an unsafe lane change, and basically that he was trying to um, safely operate around that state trooper moving to the right lane so he wouldn't be close to him. And that got overturned pretty quickly. So we won that one, the following distance violation. And there's the email basically carrier saying, thank you for submitting it. The following too close violation was removed. So those are just good examples for unsafe violations that we submitted and won.
I know near the end of today's webinar, you're going to talk about your success in data queues, but it always amazes me. I mean, there's a group of carriers that are willing to have things looked at and determine what can be data queued, hopefully successfully. And then there's others that just haven't gone down that path yet. Why do you think people or motor carriers, some motor carriers just have never really explored the powerful impact of a successful data queue?
I mean, from my experience in dealing with the carriers, I mean, a lot of people don't know, first of all, what a data queue is. They don't know what they could challenge and what they can't. But that's why you contact Mark or myself and be like, hey, I have a couple questions on these inspections. Can you guys help me? Or we could even do a review of your inspections. We offer that service as well. I mean, it just get with your producer, and if it's something that interests you, we're more than happy to help you guys.
Yeah, I think another thing that I think motor carriers get discouraged after, data queuing 10 to 15 inspections that they believe the violation was wrongly put on the inspection report and they get turned down every time. We put on a class on how to do a successful data queue and how we do it. And our success rate is much higher than, you know, 0 to 10%. So I
Yeah.
want to back up to our case study 5.
Yep.
On this inspection with those 4 different violations, this motor carrier actually got this inspection to me within a day or two of the inspection being done, and we were a couple weeks out from the snapshot date. So the snapshot date is when FMCSA takes all the information from all the inspection reports and all the data queues, and they compile that information, and a week and a half later, they publish the new scores based off of that information. We were able to do this data queue for these 4 violations, so it didn't negatively impact their CSA scores for the next month. So we are able to get it in before the snapshot date and get it adjudicated, so they didn't have those violations negatively affecting their CSA scores that following month.
Guys, we do have another question from a Jacqueline. Hopefully, I didn't butcher that name too much. Um, just a question regarding what are the best safety practices that the FMCSA, I guess, encourages? What is the distance recommended to the operators to avoid a serious violation of unsafe distances? Yeah, I think you see the rest of it there. If you guys want to tackle that a little bit.
All
I
right.
know
So,
I mean, I'll start off, but the main goal of FMCSA is to deteriorate collisions. That's one of their main goals. When it comes to falling distance, every state has different laws, so I would say kind of review the state law where you're traveling and kind of read through it. I know Arizona, we wouldn't cite anybody unless it was 3 second. I would use a stopwatch. At 3 to 5 second distance, then you were following too close. So every state's a little different. So what I would recommend is kind of um, know the state you travel in, read the state law, and it'll help you a lot.
hey, Dan, do you remember what the law is in Arizona for following distance?
It doesn't even have a distance. It's just with like due regard to the motoring public or something like that. Like
And in the state of Wisconsin, outside of a business district,
uh,
which they don't really define in state law, it's 500 feet for a commercial motor vehicle. And it doesn't say anything about weather, road conditions, day or night. Doesn't talk anything about that. It's just straight 500 feet. You know, if you're there on the I-94 north-south corridor, it's an 8-lane interstate, 4 lanes in each direction. 20,000 trucks. You can imagine how many cars go on there. How do you maintain 500 feet in that area? But that's the state law. And every state is different because it is a state law when it comes to that. When I teaching my kids how to drive, I always tell them never follow another vehicle so closely that you're not able to stop without slamming on the brakes before impacting them if their vehicle stopped at a dead stop right then and there, because that can happen, right? So if you can't stop in that time, then you're following too closely. Um, So I wish
So,
we had a good, really good answer, but as speed increases, so does your traveling distance. As the weather changes, so does your traveling distance. Day or night, the visibility of your headlights, that you got to take into consideration speed at that time. You don't want to overdrive your headlights because you can't see things so far down the roadway that where you can't stop in time if there's something in the roadway.
yeah, so I just pulled up state law in Arizona and it literally says the driver of motor vehicle shall not follow another vehicle more closely than is reasonable and prudent and shall have a that should have due regard for the speed of vehicles on the traffic and on the conditions of the highway. Doesn't give you feet, doesn't give you seconds. Um, they do recommend 3 seconds, 5 to 6 seconds, depending on rain and stuff like that. So
Well, we all know how congested roads are. So even if you got to that hypothetical 500 feet, that your space between you and the vehicle ahead of you, it'll just be a second before a car zooms by and cuts right in and, shortens that distance once again. So I think it also highlights the importance of forward-looking cameras for instances like that. But yeah, those were successful. You were able to challenge that one successfully. So let's go back to where we were.
Yep, right there. All right, moving on to case study number 7, Barlar Freight in the CSA alert for vehicle maintenance. This was a local carrier in my area. It's a client of Reliance. We started conducting roadside inspections en route for the drivers. This is an intermodal carrier. There's a lot of out of the Chicago area. There are several rail yards there. They have a big port there. Milwaukee has a big port. We see a lot of intermodal traffic coming through the area. So we sat at the state line on I-94 in between Illinois and Wisconsin just prior to the scale in Wisconsin. And we literally inspected the vehicles. We did it once a month and we did it for a year and a half. The first 2 months, we would be finding violations on every vehicle, obvious violations. And these are just walk around inspections that we would be doing. We would find violations with medical certificates, CDLs, hours of service for not maintaining the required items in the vehicle. Uh, and that was the first month. The second month, it started getting a little less. The third month, it was a lot less. By the sixth month, we had a hard time finding any violations on any of the vehicles that we were inspecting. They came out of the vehicle maintenance alert a few months after that because they were pretty deep into it. Anybody that hauls intermodal containers know that the intermodal chassis are terrible. We found out that the ABS lights on those trailers, they rarely work. The tires are usually really bad. But once we started showing that management was looking, the violations that roadside inspectors look for, explaining that they have tire pressure sensors in the roadway prior to you going into the scales coming northbound into Wisconsin. They started paying more attention to their equipment to the point where it almost seemed fruitless of us being out there. We were wasting our time because we weren't finding anything, which is kind of the point of being out there, holding everyone accountable for doing a good pre-trip, post-trip inspection. And it had a very good effect on the safety culture of the drivers. So they came out of the alert. It's pretty awesome. And we did this in person. That's me sitting in between the tractor and the
I was going
trailer.
to say that fellow looked familiar there. I want to thank Renee for a nice call out. She says, Mark, that the data queue class that you've taught is what her company has been using, and they've been very successful challenging violations. She says, even if you don't want to write a data queue, it helps to easily identify a violation that can be removed. Take this class when it's offered. I'm pretty sure you're going to do it in July in Tennessee ahead of our trucking matters. Do you have some other time scheduled for that? I think that would be what, July 21st or July 22nd. Our event is on the 23rd.
Mhm.
Do you have other times, maybe in the Midwest or elsewhere, that you're planning on doing a data queue class?
I have not, but if you're interested in doing hosting a data queue class, contact me. You'll get my email. You'll see my cell phone. I only have one cell phone. I don't have a personal and a work phone. And ask, hey, I can get 15 carriers here on this day if you could do a data queue class for us. Absolutely. And I walk through the steps of exactly how I do the submissions. It all depends on how long you want the class to be, but I walk you through on how I do the data queues and how we're successful at it.
Well, let's keep moving. Thank you for the questions and comments.
Thank you, Renee.
So case study Vega Express, they're an alert in the crash indicator. So company had recently been involved in a few accidents that drove the crash indicator from a 27 to a 70%, now in alert status. So they reached out to me and said, "Hey, can you review our accident reports to see if anything could be challenged through the data queue process?" And so I reviewed the accidents they sent me over and determined that three of the accidents, the two non-injury accidents and the other one, a fatality, fell within the rear end collision and DUI under the crash preventability determination program. So I typed them up, submitted them. This is actually a current case, so they're in review. I'm 99% confident that we're gonna win them. And so in the next, I would say, month and a half to 2 months, the score is going to reflect the following. So they're going to go from a 70% to a 33%. And the one that's really affecting them is that fatal accident that it was a rear end accident.
Mm.
Yeah, some things we don't talk a lot about is how we can do a predictive analysis on what your future CSA scores will look like if we could get violations or crashes removed off of your CSA profile. We can even do a predictive analysis of what's going to happen the next month based off of the inspection reports that are coming in. So you'll know whether or not you possibly might be going into an alert or not going into an alert if you're at that level or close, right at the cutoff points of that. So these are some of the things that we can do as well as walk you through, and so you know what to expect in the coming months. All right. Uh, Case study number 9, Albrecht expedited. I think we're picking on Mr. Albrecht a little bit. Failed an FMCSA audit. I think this might be the second audit that Albrecht has failed on here. But this time there are two factors in which they failed. One, they failed factor 3, part 395, and they failed it due to log falsifications. And then they failed factor 4, the vehicle factor, in which they had an out of service rate of 50%, which exceeds the limit of 34% or higher within the last year, right? So they went to a conditional rating. This was a current client of ours. The producer called me up and said, Mark, can you help them out? Well, I need to get a copy of the audit so we could take a look and see what happened. And they sent me this. I said, this is what we need to do. We need to do crash countermeasure trainings, hours of service, and vehicle maintenance training to this has to be given out to all of our drivers. So with that, we created a PowerPoint that went over all the lights and required reflectors, everything that can be found on a walk around inspection. We don't train drivers to go underneath the vehicle to check brake systems. These are everything that would be done on a level two of what an officer is going to look at. We walked them through it. We walked them through what the misuse of personal conveyance is, how to identify that, how our safety teams can identify when drivers are misusing personal conveyance. We help them identify when drivers log out of the system and continue to drive. This motor carrier was unique in the fact that they operated some longer haul. This was another intermodal company, Albrecht Expedited Intermodal Division. So they had some drivers that operated under the short haul exception for hours of service. So we provided that training as well. When it comes to a falsifications for an ELD, in order to successfully have that conditional rating change, you have to submit your own audit that you do on your drivers, and you have to do it at the same rate using the same drivers. So we put the drivers through the training, and then we did an audit. First audit failed. Um, I didn't even get to the point where we hit the amount of drivers that we needed to review because we were at the critical rate of over 10%, which would have kept us in a conditional. We would have never have been upgraded. So we provided additional training. And on the second one, a month and a half later, they passed the audit with a 9.52 critical false percentage. Now you can see next to it, it says 21.9%. These are little types of falsifications where the vehicle was moved by the driver and there was no drive time or on duty not driving if you're utilizing yard move, things of that nature. If they go off duty when they get fuel, that would be a non-critical false. And I am well aware of what a critical false is during an FMCSA audit. Not every falsification is a critical false. Once they passed that log audit, we were able to submit a safety management plan. It took a few months. And then we got back from the motor carrier. Mark, I wanted to reach out and let you know that we received a letter from FMCSA that we are no longer a conditional carrier. We are now a satisfactory carrier. And I personally wanted to thank you for your efforts in getting it submitted and then resubmitted for consideration. I really appreciate everything you did, and I'm very happy that you are on the side of this mess that I inherited. You helped save a company from financial ruins. They were literally within months of shutting down. Maybe one day we can meet in person so I can thank you in person. Thank you again.
Yeah, and I love that story because at the end there, maybe one day we can meet in person. Sometimes the audience may think they need to have a relationship with you to be able to help at that level. But you just showed, no, you're here regardless of the circumstances.
Yep. The first step in everything you need to do to get some assistance, make a call. It's either to your producer, or if you're not working with Reliance right now, call us directly and we will see that what we can do for you and help earn your business.
All right.
All right. So case study number 10. It's not really a case study, but this is a massive company. Albrecht, Vega, and Barlar mer had a merger and presented a need for a data queue assistance. So Reliance Partner Safety Impact Team has submitted well over 1,500 data queue challenges in the past 5 years. We have a success rate of over 70% across all seven basic categories, including crashes and wrong carrier listed on the inspection report. The wrong carrier listed is not my vehicle, not my driver. I don't know how we got listed on this inspection report. Multiple producers of ours call us up and say, Mark, My insured got an inspection that's not listed on their vehicle list, the insurance company is going to cancel them. They say it's not theirs. We got a system where we can go in and look up VINs. We can look up registration plates and see if they've ever been inspected before. And then we can see who the motor carrier was listed. If the motor carrier has a US DOT number that's off by one number, that's probably the reason why it got put on ours. The driver, the inspecting officer had big fingers and they hit the wrong number. If somebody did it because they failed, they were owner operator and they failed to remove the lettering on the side of the door. Well, we can take the information showing that the lease was canceled for the vehicle equipment and the driver, when it was canceled, when they were removed from the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, and any other information showing that this driver was no longer operating for us, and look for inspections after that date to see if they were inspected and working for another company. We submit all that information on a data queue and we win that. So the average win rate is between 25 and 35% for everybody else. We're well over 70%. That 25 to 35%, I think, has increased in the last 5 years just due to the crash preventability determination program. I used to answer data queues for the state of Wisconsin. The win percentage in the state of Wisconsin when I did it was about 5% because people didn't quite understand what is needed to be successful in the data queue process. Um, so I think that's why the percentage goes up because the crash preventability determination program pretty much tells you when you can do a data queue for crash preventability or not. When it comes to crashes, we also look at is it an FMCSA recordable crash? And if it doesn't meet one of the three criteria, we do the data queue and explain to them why it should come completely off of your CSA profile.
We're
So
down to
those,
the last few minutes here. Encourage the audience to submit a question through the chat icon. But I also want to just make clear that you guys can do things well beyond the 7 CSA basics. And so I know sometimes both of you go and you'll do some driver training, and it may be related to CSA scores, but it may be other topics. So as folks take down your contact information here, can you just give us a couple of other examples where you've gone on site to motor carriers and maybe done a driver meeting or met with other professionals? Daniel, you already described the one where it was a mix of dispatch, I think maybe planners, as well as the safety team. So one of you guys start us off there.
I mean, I've gone out to the carrier's yard and done some inspections on their trailers, just kind of like what Mark did, but in route. But I went to the carrier's yard and they got inspected an hour after that trailer left, and they got their CVSA sticker. So I mean, we could do things like that as well.
yeah, we've gone out and done en-route inspections at a choke point for where that motor carrier has vehicles operating through all day long. We can do those types of inspections. We do driver meetings. We can do specific types of training for dispatchers on how to identify hazardous materials loads. We can do training on how to properly ship hazmat. I get from my hazmat clients, I get telegram messages all the time. Say, Mark, is this hazmat shipping paper good? I'm like, oh my God, please tell me this isn't what your driver has. Yeah, all right. This is what we need to do to fix it. Okay. And I can write up a hazardous material manifest to comply with FMCSA and PIMSA, the Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration regulations, without changing the pertinent information for the carrier and whatnot. We can definitely do that as well. Mark, what type of placarding do we need on the vehicle? Can this driver even haul this type of product? Does it need placarding on it? Mark, can my vehicle haul this? We're a box truck company. It weighs 15,000 pounds and we got 20,000 pounds of product we need to put on it. Can we haul it like this? Not unless your driver has a class B CDL. So we can answer all of those types of questions. And myself and Daniel has been doing it so long that a lot of that stuff's sitting right up here. We don't have to take, a couple hours looking things up because we've enforced it for so long. That's one of the nice things about having that type of background, is it kind of comes second nature after a while.
And Mark and I have also done post-collision inspections as well. So if you're involved in those severe accidents, we're just one call away. We're here to guide you through them if you need the help. Um, of what might happen or what could happen or what you should do from a company standpoint.
One of my favorite things to do as well, I highlight this every now and then, is if your driver's sitting there and he got stopped right now and he's getting, say, placed out of service for his ELD. Hey, send me the information. Let me take a look at it. If it looks good, get me on the phone with that driver if he's still there. And we can talk to the officer and say, hey, this is what we're seeing on our end. If this is what you're seeing, this is why it is the way that it is, or you're misinterpreting the law, or he's not over hours because he does have a split sleeper berth. And here are the interpretations from FMCSA stating that it can be done this way. And hopefully that inspection report will then they'll have those violations removed without ever being uploaded to FMCSA. We've done that in the past as well.
I think those are great examples, guys. And so, again, there's their contact information. As we wrap up today's Safety Impact webinar with all these case studies, within the next day or two, you'll be getting a link to the recording as well as the slides. And as a final reminder, our next episode will be on February 12th at 3 p.m. Eastern, and we will begin to make that sign up link available sometime next week. On behalf of Reliance Partners, I want to thank everyone in the audience who joined us today. We had some great questions, and we look forward to helping you in any way possible. So take care, everyone, and we will see you soon. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.